Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by our friends at Esri. I'm Barbara Duke, Editor-in-Chief here at Directions Magazine, joined by our senior webinar producer, Lynette Collier. We encourage you to read the latest geospatial news, articles, listen to podcasts. Of course, we are saving all the wonderful webinars for you at directionsmag.com. We are excited to have Brooks, Civil, and Svante with us today to talk about ArcGIS Urban. We're excited to learn something new about how we are using that technology in city planning. They've got some wonderful examples for you and practical tips. Welcome, team. We're excited to hear more.
Thank you very much, Barbary. Welcome to everyone to our webinar, Shaping the Future of European Cities with ArcGIS Urban. What we are focusing on today is the central challenge of how to bring data and decision-making together in the context of spatial planning in Europe. So today we have two amazing guest speakers that will give you a quick look into some of their most recent work. My name is Brooks Patrick, and I will be moderating today's session. I'm the Global Business Development Manager for Spatial Planning and Smart Cities at Esri. With me today, we have Dr. Sibylle Walti, Senior Researcher and Group Leader at ETH Zurich. She will be sharing her recent work with the city of Baden in Switzerland, a community with a population of around 18,000, just down the road from the city of Zurich. We also have Svante Gutterstam, a strategic community planner at Uppsala municipality in Sweden. Uppsala is one of the fastest growing cities in Sweden and is expected to grow from about 230,000 residents to over 350,000 residents by 2050. So Svante will be giving us a look at one of the largest comprehensive planning efforts underway, a part of which is actually shown here in this image. So we have two excellent cases today that are going to be looking at how to use data and tools to better understand what exactly sustainable development means in a local context. And before I hand it over to my colleagues, I would like to quickly set the context for the presentation. So over the next 20 to 30 years, many cities will face challenges in meeting the needs of their growing populations. This includes housing, basic services, and other infrastructure. And based on a report from the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, 74% of people in Europe are living in cities. And this is expected to increase to 84% by 2050. So this concentration is higher than anywhere else in the world. And it also reflects a unique opportunity to address global climate change. Another recent study from the European Commission on land use patterns says that built-up areas are likely to expand by more than 3% from 2015 to 2030. So sustainable development increasingly depends on the successful management of urban growth, especially for low-income and middle-income communities. And what we know is that our cities will grow. Now the question is, how do we want them to grow to ensure that the benefits are fully shared and inclusive? So working at Esri provides a unique opportunity to speak with planners, designers, geospatial professionals around the world. And what we see across many of the cities and the regional agencies that we work with is that they face some common challenges. They're looking to lower the cost of recurring plan updates and bring more accountability towards meeting goals, especially related to housing, for example. They're also driving the trend of opening up GIS access to professionals in planning and design and architecture, with the intention or the action of transforming some more traditional analog processes to digital ones. The question is, what does digital mean? Many communities lack a common understanding of land use and its associated regulation, and there's a growing need for more comprehensive, more long-term demand-based planning. So how do we connect the scientific and the complex language of city planning that you're going to be hearing about on this call to the lived reality of citizens and residents in the community? So digital has the potential to improve a city's ability to react and add efficiency. There must also be trust in the data-driven decision-making process itself. I do want to point out that all of the technology that we're going to be talking about today already exists and is actually available to you. So ArcGIS Urban, it's an application suite that is being developed out of Esri's Zurich R&D Center. And we have an amazing team developing the web-based software to support spatial planning and urban development. Urban is being used by cities, regions, private design firms for scenario planning and collaboration during the planning process. A core element of urban is the ability to test and design zoning or land use changes and visualize it. So you can analyze the existing situation, modeling the regulations, you can try proposed variances, and even find the maximum site potential. Scenarios can be quickly iterated through, and concepts can be developed and then compared quantitatively, but also visually. So building forms that you see in the image are used to report on housing production, employment opportunities, mobility. And these building forms can be data-driven, or you can manually model out the site. We also see this as a platform to enable better collaboration between the public and private sector. So today, systems are restricted by siloed data, and there's this critical need to integrate planning data sets to speed up the design review process. So the upload of project content coming from BIM, for example, can save time during the review process, and it can also add value to more long-term planning studies. We designed Urban to facilitate a data-driven planning and design process. The capabilities that we'll be discussing today are built on a geospatial data model shown here in a very high level. So Urban facilitates the relationships between these layers and then provides you the best experience to model out and test alternative scenarios in your next project. Our first guest speaker today is Dr. Sibyl Walty, who will take us through her work in the city of Baden. So over to you, Sibyl.
Yeah, hi, welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're located in the world. It's a great pleasure to present my small hometown almost for 20 years now, the city of Baden. What you see on this picture is actually the old medieval town, and well, surprising or not, it's the highest density of residents that live in what you see here. In the whole city. What we're going to be looking at in the next couple of minutes is more faced to the left. It's called Oberstadt, and plus because it's more than just what they initially thought we will look at. Yeah, it's always good to also have a look back at what happened in the past, and well, we tend to, or we plan to look into the future for 100 years, but what we see here is a look back at 100 years. So what you see as a triangle is the Oberstadt, and to the north you can see the old town, and to the west and east you see how there was nothing. So when we look at 2018 on the next slide, yeah, we can see that the urban structure has changed significantly from the old town to now the new town. We have a lot more white patches than we have black buildings. So we can have a look at what's the perimeter that we're planning on. Initially, the city of Baden intended to look at only 6 hectares as a neighborhood that they usually, or that's actually even bigger what they normally look at in this. I call it patchwork planning, where we look at smaller and bigger sites and then think of something that is more or less, often less related to the neighborhood. And in our concept, we think about a 10-minute neighborhood to say, or that's the bigger goal for this neighborhood. And we have 46 hectares of settlement area that we can call a neighborhood planning. It's not aimed at 80 hectares because 40% is forest, as we'll see later. And the idea of the project is, or basically of all the projects that we intend to do, are that we cannot transform the urban structure or by planners or politicians. It has to be something that's well grounded in with many stakeholders. What you see here is the process and that we are going through. And what you'll see as an output is the fall 2021, where we had our first workshop with people from the city or other interested, and also with land use owners that, yeah, we got their feedbacks and use that for further development. Yeah, let's just look or zoom into the perimeter on the left, the north. You can see in red the perimeter of the city of Baden, and then to the right, where you see the lake, you have the city of Zurich. It's about 17 minute train ride. At the north, you can also see the airport of Zurich for those who flew to Switzerland before. And let's try to zoom in and see how we get closer to what we will be looking at, and we have been working in. The blue buildings that are popping up as opposed to the white ones are heritage buildings of different grades. That's why the shades of blue. You again will see at the north, east of the perimeter, that's the old town, and then the railway station at the north. So let's take out some noise by switching from the imagery view to the schematic view, and also see where the neighborhoods are. Aside from the Oberstadt, we have Burghalde, Meierhof, and Ländli. These are adjacent neighborhoods that we also integrate into the development. The red line is just a working line and not a fixed line. Whatever we discover to be how it should be developed in the future would also extend beyond those red lines. But yeah, to like get control over the workload, that's also a reason why we selected that neighborhood. So what's quite handy with urban is that you can, well, on the one hand, put in the zoning layers, so you can get a control on what's currently zoned, and you can also add buffers for the forest or the lines for where the building should stand, so that we can see what's already there as a base to work on. And then with the zoning envelopes, you get the power to actually see in comparison to what's there, where does it match and where could potentially be added more height, or where what you can see here also, OEB is public area, and W3 is residential housing, 3 levels. So those are the 2 biggest shares of those 46 hectares that we have the zoning of in this perimeter. And yeah, clearly W3 is not a very high density. What the city of Baden also has is 2 overlays of high rises. One is 70 meter and one is 55 meters. This is something that they again spots have within the city. Not very many. Switzerland has long been very hesitant about high rises. And urban really helps you, although in the city of Baden it's not that easy, because the definition of the setback, of the long setback, is 2 times the number of levels and 2/3 of something. So parametrically, theoretically, you would have to already know what kind of project would be on the plot to actually define the setback. That's why we kind of roughed it out here, but still we can see where things are not overlapping with what's there, and if you would want to rebuild it, where you would run into a problem. Yeah, the city of Baden, in their development concept that they, I think, released 2019, the red part, the Oberstadt, means there's a high, it's high potential or a high interest in transformation. The blue one a bit less, and the green one, is not very focused. You have about 2,000 residents and 2,000 jobs, and what you can see here now is the scenarios or the alternatives that we worked on to study typologies more, that we would fit the same amount of number of people within that perimeter. Initially, we aimed for 10,000 residents and 500 jobs. Due to the existing fabric and the fact that we lost 40% to forest, you can see now in the second variant that when we do not have high rise, we have to transform parts of the hillside, which has other effects visually and atmospherically than when you have high rise at the Meierhof quartier or the Oberstadt quartier in the first version. What we also try to leverage on is the metrics that you can use in urban we inserted the green space areas as demanded, 8 square meter and 5 per residence and 5 meter per employment, something we took from the city of Zurich. Always smaller cities in Switzerland always look to the big brother or sister city. And we also looked at the current regulation of parking. Here you have a brief overview of the metrics that we drew up. What you can see here in the building up is that the version of actually having high rise of 20 stories. That was quite a bit over the top. 20 stories was kind of shocking everybody, but you can also see for the parking how many car parkings would be needed, close to 4,000 that you would have to build to go with the current zoning, which in the end will basically kind of lose your noise problem due to traffic, because maybe your cars most of the time won't be moving anymore because the road that's already quite loaded nowadays would be overloaded. So the number of trips would that we already have now would be added just by the fact that you add parking or have to add parking possibilities, or it's rather hard to not have to, or it's more difficult not to add them in theory. So clearly the model share would decrease in theory, but practically if you add parking, it will have a negative effect. What we see here now is only 15-story high buildings, which gained a higher acceptance than the one with the 20 stories. And another cool tool that came out basically just around that time is the suitability analysis that we used as a probability analysis of building age, owner type, zoning, protection, to then kind of guesstimate which parcels would be developed more recently than others. And what you see here is a first stage of development according to those probability that we estimated, where we would expect that something would be happening in this first phase. And then we also grasped the opportunity that we could set the bookmarks. We're now flying through a ruin, popular like famous in a sense, ruin of the city of Baden, where you usually go up to get a nice look over the city. We're also using that now in this digital tool, where we have this stage where we have 15 stories, and again you can see at that stage we would have 6,000 people living there, living and working in that perimeter neighborhood. We were actually also striving to get a ratio of 2 residents to 1. This comes from the fact that in Switzerland only half of the population is working, because the other half is too old or too young. What you see here now as a version is a 7-story as a base and 11 as a higher building. That's what the definition is in the city of Baden, as a middle. They call it the missing middle. I know in other parts of the world the missing middle is around 5 stories, but yeah. And then we took a view from a road axis, that you come from the highway with your car. Basically, you just drive there. Not recommended to do it with your bicycle. There's other paths that are safer to do that. And here, just for demonstration, basically, again, the first stage with 6-story base and 15. The ones that would be developed, but then also in the final stage where all the new buildings would be built, and this in comparison to the existing, where you can see the difference, how this changed. The current building, actually, the height is the one of 15 stories that we're used to. And then there's the chance to have a comparison with the reality. So for demonstration, I also would like to show you this opportunity that is built in, that you could also move along. I think that's it for the demonstration of the tool. So maybe just to sum up, the zoning as it's currently is two-dimensional. We don't have any really qualitative criteria on how our built environment should look like. We can see when we start using urban, we get into the 3D dimension. Also with the zoning envelopes, we have this opportunity to kind of control for the spaces that we create with the buildings that we are planning to do. And then 2,000 residents and 2,000 jobs in 2018. And in the next, the variant 1, where we colored the buildings according to the typologies, more or less. High-rise neighborhoods would be in darker brown, and the 6-story base would be in lighter brown. That's variant 1 with the high-rise at the Oberstadt. The variant 2 with no high-rises and some bigger buildings on the south hillside. And then the last one, the variant 3, where you would have high rise at the Meierhof on the eastern side. All three variants containing 9,000 to 12,000 residents and jobs. The variance of 3,000 comes from the space consumption, which is very, well, I would say very high at 50 square meter per resident. So if we could maybe reduce that, then we could either build less or add more residents. To our surprise, maybe you can go one slide back. We were all expecting that the people that in general don't like high-rise would favor this one. And to our big surprise, the people said, "Oh no, that's not what we planned for the city of Bonn. That's just too uniform. We would like to have variation." And that's the takeaway we took, that we then embrace this input, that we would think of different atmospheres within that perimeter. Some references, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Sybil. It's amazing to hear that the missing middle in Europe is 5 stories. I believe in the US it's borderline 3, if we're lucky sometimes. So that's definitely interesting. And thank you very much for your presentation. Quick question, which of the 3 versions was the most popular?
Yeah, there's no, as opposed to which was not popular, there's no clear answer to this, but the tendency was that the one with the Oberstadt having the high rise, the Oberstadt which is close, version 1, which is closer to the city center. So that's kind of like sort of common sense, I guess. The closer you're to the center, the more you expect to have more people. It would also entirely make sense as you could there and more easily walk to the train station within 10 minutes from that location. So yeah, the tendency was towards there, but there's no clear message there. But the acceptance for high rise is already a good message, or was a good message for us to take on board, to keep thinking towards this.
Great. Well, thank you again. And for our second speaker, I would like to introduce Svante Gutterstam from Uppsala Municipality in Sweden. He will be giving you a short introduction to some of their work on a Southeast Comprehensive Plan. Over to you, Svante.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Svante Gutterstam, community planner for Uppsala. We start off with some of these buildings in this picture is also from the medieval city. But I'm going to talk mostly about projects further south from the historic city center that we look at here, where we have been working mostly with urban. So a few kilometers south of the historic center is we find the site of the project where we have been trying out urban the last couple of years, and yes, it's a major development where most of Uppsala's planning capacity is centered, and it starts off with investments from the state of Sweden in infrastructure with a new railway station that you can see here in the bottom right. That is sort of the core of this new district that we are planning. Uppsala had to provide 33,000 new housing units as a counter achievement in order to get this investment, and that's what I'm going to show you now, how we have been working to reach that number and using urban. This shows Uppsala located north of Stockholm. As you can see, it has a big countryside, and we're gonna head back to the city center just to show you a little bit of the data that we have in 3D that we start off using urban with. So we have from a LiDAR scan we have extracted buildings, and we also have trees and topography. Yes, and this it's the church again, our cathedral, and the historic city. It's very dense. It's a student town, and it's really proximity, and biking is Uppsala is famous for its sort of vast that biking is a main mean of transportation for most of the students living here, and that's something that we try to maintain and enforce in the continuing planning that's ongoing in this growth. Here we can see some of all the ongoing detailed plans, regulation plans that the city is working on. Here we see a new tramway that's being planned to the new station in the south, where this new districts are being developed or being planned. And we have been using urban to build project models for this. You can see these three projects, and we're going to look further in detail into this closest one, where we have to reach 21,500 housing units. So if we enter the editing mode of urban, so this is the overview that we've been looking at now, which is great for communication and orientation of where things take place. And in the editing mode is where we actually have built these models, and we have the parametric connection to all the surfaces that we create using urban, which makes it very easy to track the content of the project and of what we have in the model in different scenarios. So yeah, I show you here how you can just make a selection if you have a specific part of the model or the area that you are particularly interested in. You can select it, and then you will get this table of the content represented on the site. So this is something we have been using a lot, and we have been exporting a lot of tables from urban to keep track of GFA per block or per district or per traffic analysis zone. Yeah, and we have also been seeing the functionality of studying different scenarios. We can, for example, look at, like here, the lightning conditions throughout the year, and basically elaborate different designs, which has been very useful in this project, and it's makes it kind of playful as a planner to be able to try out different structures and different scenarios. In this project, we were very centered on reaching the target of 21,500. So the main the center of the project efforts has been to study one scenario. Used that model that we were looking at, we exported it into and published it on the city's webpage and displayed it like this during the public hearing, and it gained a lot of traffic. Most of the visits of the project page were actually to this model, so it showed that it's attractive to look on a 3D model. I guess it's easy to understand, and you get some intuitive understanding. But it's also very important, I think. We also realized that everyone sees different things when they look at it. We tried to make it to sort of display that this is in an early stage of the planning by using sketchy edges and these abstract trees, so that it would be communicating that this is a possible outcome of the project and the planning at this early stage, but it's not the only outcome with the plans that we are making right now. This is way more detailed than what the plan is actually regulating. But this is the direction of the plan, and I think it's an honest way to show the direction of the planning, to actually draw the buildings and makes it more understandable. But I think one of the learnings of showing this was that it would have been very useful to show at least two scenarios, so that it would be communicating that it's not set in stone, it's an open process. Yeah, in a meeting during the public hearing just before the pandemic, and we had to turn entirely digital, but we also, and in this physical meeting, we were handing out iPads, and we were helping and showing people how to navigate in the model and answered questions. So it was gaining a lot of attention, this model. Yeah, and then we move on to the next sort of use area that where we've been working with urban, which was this visualization of the climate impact from the construction process, where you here can see the time plans of construction of different stages of this project. The yellow ones are early, and the red ones are later in the closer to 2050. And for the apartment buildings that we have illustrated here, we have three increased performance types. So it's 30, 50, and 70% less carbon emissions than what we build today. And this shows how we need to distribute them in the area to reach a 12% decrease per year, which is according to the Paris Agreement. So we have used this dashboard to just trace that the emissions we generate per year in the construction process compared to what we would generate with these with the sort of introduction of these improved housing types. It's a little bit complicated, but it was a visualization of a pretty dense sort of Excel sheet, and at least it becomes more understandable when you're looking at it like this. And we saw that we could use it. We have some ideas of how we can use it. Can move on to the next. Yeah, so one idea is that we can always present developers 3D models in the city model. So we can look at their 3D model in the context on site. So we see how it sort of add values to the surroundings, or whether it's not doing that. So it becomes a way of showing how they sort of contribute to a district or to the city with their project. And we can also have an indicator for whether they are sort of within the carbon roadmap. We have Uppsala has a roadmap of carbon emissions. So whether their project would stay within that budget, or whether and it's sort of a way of showing that they are in line with the roadmap, and we believe that it could be a way of sort of nudge the developers to make their part or contribute and sort of compete with each other. So it would be a way to display that. Another idea, if we move on to the next, is that we can use that visualization in the land allocation process, where we have quality criteria when developers are competing for a plot, that we could use this visualization about what kind of performance type your building needs to stay within as a criteria for the evaluation of the different proposals. So this is some of the learnings that we have made so far using Urban. We can look at this sort of wrap up with the potential that we see. It's really a communication tool. That's sort of the obvious area of use that we thought we would use it for, and which has turned out to be very, very powerful. And we also have tried a little bit. We're curious to try the functions for gathering ideas in Urban. So we think this, by displaying a model or publishing a model on a web page, it's really makes the planning more transparent, and it's this kind of tools make it possible to include citizens to give their feedback. But then we also, when we developed these models, we realized how useful Urban have been as a planning tool, to have this high level of detail in the early stages of the process, to basically have the content of the different scenarios, the reporting with different scenarios, what they contain, different use types, how much GFA we have. So we believe it can really support the planning teams, but and also decision makers when seeing this kind of 3D models rather than just surfaces on a 2D plan. But it's to reach this. We also realized that we work on pilot projects where we are people that are particularly interested in and curious about learning to use these kind of new tools, but it's to get to implement it in the whole organization when we really can get a lot of synergies. If we would have all of our planning projects in the same interface, we could have much more of a data-driven approach throughout the department, and the different stages would be better connected with each other. And to make that step, that is I think the big challenge we now face, to make that lift. But yeah, it's been a very interesting start with the pilot projects where we have tried out these functions. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Amazing work, Svante. Thank you very much for sharing. Incredible that you guys put this up on your website, generated traffic, put it on iPads. That's, I mean, the impact of a visual is, you know, they say what picture is worth 1,000 words. So it must be true. Great. All right. And before moving on to our final Q&A session, I wanted to invite you to schedule a demo. Or if you missed our last poll, you can also use this QR code to schedule a 30-minute meeting. Sometimes, again, it just takes a short meeting to get oriented into the right direction, and getting started with your own data is actually quite straightforward. Uploading your parcels, uploading your buildings, and so forth. And so the next slide here, I also wanted to use to point you to further resources, especially our webinars. So please register for an upcoming webinar that we have called What's New in ArcGIS Urban. The next one that we have coming up is going to have some amazing new features that everyone here will definitely want to know about. There's actually new out-of-the-box data, new capabilities, so it's going to be a really exciting release. And now we want to open it up to questions. We'll open the floor to questions. I'd like to go ahead and kick off the discussions today with one of my own to the presenters. So I'll ask you first, Svante, going back to the beginning of our session today, if people don't understand what digital means in the context of city planning, and you mentioned this as one of your challenges, you know, the efforts could be easily pulled in different directions. Do you have any experiences where you needed to bring everyone to the same level on what it means to have this kind of digital approach? And, you know, how did you accommodate that? How did you bring everyone to that same level of understanding?
Well, I wish we were there, and I could say that we did it, but we did it in gathered efforts. Like we managed to do it for this project, and now we're looking at like broadening this approach and having more of a digital workflow throughout the organization, and that is challenging, as I was mentioning. Like it's every project has their own culture, using different projects, having different consultants and architects. So I think we are now approaching them like individually and try to like identify what workflow they could use, or how we can sort of invite architects, consultants to the municipality to work directly in our urban models and deliver their BIM models directly without having to do hands-on work on our own before that we have to put it in. I think we have been trying both to sort of help and assist these teams, and we also have had some trainings with bigger groups in our organization. So it's I think we need to have a sort of persistence, or to not expect it to happen overnight, but I think we are gaining more and more attention, and more of our teams see the benefits. So I think that's very important.
So it sounds like building it up project by project slowly, the competence also builds, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great. And same question to you, Sibyl. I know, this is a powerful concept, and Baden is a town, even more than maybe the definition of a city. Do you have also some experiences where you needed to bring, the local officials up to the level of what it means to have this kind of digital approach? What are some of the challenges you faced?
I'd put it that way. I mean, in a way, not so much the planners within the city. They are used to looking at plans, but when you're talking to the general public or the landowners who's not everyday business to look at plans, they're already overwhelmed sometimes by looking at the map. And when you then go to the 3D level, it's another level when they look at it at the first time. So it's a process, I think, for everyone to kind of get used to that. You can look at things in different ways, and at the same time, in the beginning, of course, there's always kind of you're used to things, and then you kind of don't like the new stuff. But then I think they also then realized or liked what they can see. So for the small city of Baden, well, we haven't really gotten them there to be actually using it. They're not very strong in doing, or like they usually commission external firms to do also their zoning. So for them to really use any CAD or GIS software is not really in the scope right now. But also just to embrace the opportunities, not using themselves for now is already a big leap forward. And I mean, yeah, like Svante said, every exposure and every project brings it closer. So I mean, that's maybe also a reason why I decided to look that we can teach at ETH, that we can students in the early phase of their education get this exposure that they then can bring to the cities and to the planning offices. Yeah, I think that's yeah, that I see as part of my to do as a researcher and a teacher at ETH. So I think it's I mean, even when I think about when I started my PhD 5-6 years ago, to do something in 3D, forget about it, right? Then somehow, yeah, you gets better. With every release, it gets better, and at the same time, there's always things where you go like, come on, this is not quite there yet. But I mean, yeah, I think it's just so new, and I think it's like also like working together to embrace these opportunities that we have to really also visualize what we put in a text, right? It's easy to put 1,500 people on a text, but then when you have to visualize it and you go, what? That's what we wrote.
And this reminds me of something you showed me.
Yeah.
You showed me after or before this webinar. We didn't have it in the presentation, but some of the approach you took was actually to take some of the 3D scenarios and just visualize them in 2D. And the 2D visualization is almost more digestible for an uninformed or not familiar with 3D type of audience, right?
Well, I guess it just does not make you face the reality, right? Because if you just say it's 6 stories, you can't just imagine whatever you like, and then, yeah. I mean, yeah, but yeah, there's always pros and cons. I mean, it is even with the sketchy edge, right? I mean, you still think that's the envelope of the building, or like people still think so. So this kind of level of detail questions is quite a tricky one. You said a picture is worth 1,000 words, but it can also be a hard burden once the picture is out. How do you get it out of the brains when it's the picture that you didn't want to present? So,
Yeah,
or like,
absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think we're all learning on a daily basis. So, but I think it's, well, I'm convinced that that's the future, that we have to use the tools that we have to create our future built environment. And yeah, so it's not always easy, but yeah, I don't think we should try to go back in 2D, because I mean, topography, I mean, the world is never flat, right?
Well, especially in Switzerland.
Especially,
You have
yeah.
a few hills.
Yeah, I mean, Baden, I mean, yeah, I mean, all this topography, right? Also for building typologies, if you just draw it on the 2D, it works. And then you look at 3D, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, 2 levels are built in, not counting to the floor to area ratio. So you should also design in 3D. I think we're, yeah, quite far away from that still, that we really think in 3D. Or 4D even, like,
Yep.
What's the rules that bring us what we would like to have in what time? Yeah.
Great. Well, I want to open it up to everyone who's on the call for questions. I do see that some are coming through the panel. Keep in mind that the questions can also be asked to our 2 speakers as well. I see a lot of Esri questions, so I'll take a couple. One question that came through here was asking, how were the trees from Uppsala created? Was LiDAR used? And if so, how is it processed? So it's a good opportunity to first let you know that there are a set of tools that Esri produces called the 3D base map solution. And part of those tools allow you to input your LiDAR, and you can also add your building footprints, but you can actually generate the buildings from LiDAR and the trees from LiDAR. So it's a very handy tool set. The LiDAR has to be a certain resolution, of course, for the tools to run well. And then I do want to also mention the webinar that's coming up, the What's New in ArcGIS Urban webinar, will be featuring some new out-of-the-box data sets. So this is maybe a sneak peek into what's coming in a couple weeks, but we will actually have a global set of 3D trees and buildings for everyone to use. So keep that in mind as well. So I see a couple of other questions coming through. Let's see. I will go ahead and take this one that says the 21-day period, the trial period, not only gives you access to urban, but there are a series of follow-along resources that are going to be able to guide you through the process of testing urban. So keep that in mind. There were some questions here about whether or not 21 days would be realistically enough time to use it on a project. And that's true. It is a quick period of time, but it allows you to try it out, and that's really the purpose of the trial. We have an example in there from Boston, where you can actually open up an example plan, click around, create your own space use types, own custom metrics, and get familiar with what you can do. And honestly, if 21 days is not enough time, just email me. We'll work out the best way to maybe look at extending it, or we'll figure out the best approach. Let's see, a couple more questions coming through here. How long does it take to use this software in a professional way? So that's a very good question. Maybe I would ask Sybil to comment on that, because you are teaching it in some of your studio courses. And honestly, if I were to encounter urban for the first time, whether it's in the studio or in a professional realm, my take is if you are familiar with a 3D tool in general, like SketchUp or Rhino or City Engine for that matter, one of Esri's tools, then it's pretty familiar. It's a 3D modeling program, and really maybe the thing to get used to in a way is the constraints that urban provides. They're beneficial for what you're planning, but in a way it also limits the 3D content creation because you're really designing the built form, not necessarily modeling street signs and park benches. So, Sybil, maybe I could ask you how long, or do you see much in the way of difficulty in getting used to using urban in your studio courses?
Well, I mean, one point is like, or one question is, do you have the data already in online? And that's what we provide the students with, because most of them are architecture students, some are planning students, and then one of the architects, they have no idea about GIS, right? I mean, even GIS to them is like, yeah, non-existent until we expose them to this. So when you have that data, and we do short videos to guide them through some of the things, and then also have them do some things without our guidance, figuring out how to get there. It's if you have the data there, it's as compared to when we tried to do it the first time ourselves, it's way easier. Then if you venture into more details, matrix and stuff, I think it's kind of like with all Esri products, right? It's not like in 5 minutes, but once you get there, you get a drive, and you have to keep using it. So yeah, it comes with practice. But to do some stuff, I mean, they're really quick. It's really quick to then start exploring, and I mean, we started the course. No, I mean, I don't know. It's yeah. If you have some guidance, it's fairly quick. Yeah, but what we realize is that yeah, the front end to have yeah, the desktop stuff is kind of for to really use all the power. You kind of also, it's helpful to have this knowledge. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
urban
exactly.
alone is not. I mean, and that's also, well, the power of the whole set, right? We also used the story maps for presentations, which was really, that was really like, they're like, what? That's so easy. But in the end, it is, and I think, yeah, I also like that I can leverage this, the power of the pro, but it can be, if you do not have it, it can really limit the power of urban. Let's put it that way. So yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, getting started is easy when you have data to start with.
That's always right.
Like I mentioned, it depends on where your project is, the state of your data, but we're actually going to be releasing a couple of data sets in our next release coming up. So keep an eye out for that. I'll just answer one more question. I know we're past the hour actually, but one question here is quite easy to answer. When you have multiple scenarios, can some of the data be shared? And also a follow-on question, is it easy to split levels? For example, having space use side by side, having two separate activities on one level. And so to answer that one, for example, yes, you can have space uses side by side on the same level. You can draw them manually, for example. And then whenever you're creating a scenario with that content, Urban actually manages all of that behind the scenes. You're actually creating the internal copies of that geometry as you go. So the scenarios themselves can then be shared, whether it's internal to public, within a group, in our environment. You can actually decide how those make their way out. But before I close, I wanted to thank both of our presenters today, Sibyl and Svante for taking the time to share your great work.
Thank you to everyone. If you're excited about urban and want to move on to some community involvement, we have webinars next week with ArcGIS Hub. So make it a great day. Tell a friend about ArcGIS Urban and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everybody.